listening to the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you the day after Memorial Day. Louise and I were at the parade yesterday. Ellen Ratner got us VIP seats, so we were in the area literally right next to where they were broadcasting television nationwide, and surrounded by defense contractors. It was very bizarre. I'll tell you more about that later on. Anyhow, I got to tell you, this is like one of those little secrets that lawyers and judges in particular don't want you to know. And you really should know. You and I have the power to end Nixon's failed drug war once and for all. In fact, it's our constitutional right to do so. Imagine for a second that you've been selected as a juror for the trial of someone like, say, Jacob Lavoro. He's a 19-year-old Austin, Texas man. He's currently facing anywhere from 5 to life. 5 years to life in prison for making 1.5 pounds of pot brownies. And let's say, as a juror, that you know that based on the evidence presented by the prosecution that he's probably guilty. Or he's maybe even confessed his guilt. But you and the other jurors on the case, you know, don't want this guy to go to jail. You think it's a stupid law. And, you know, hey, he made 1.5 pounds of pot brownies. Really? 5 years in prison? But you're on the jury. So you're trapped. I mean, the law says one thing, your conscience says the other, so what do? Here's what you don't know, or you didn't know until just now. You use your power of jury nullification. You declare the defendant not guilty, regardless of the evidence, and let him walk free, nullifying the unjust or unfair law. Just like the Supreme Court has the power to strike down laws, you too, as an American citizen, have the power to reject a specific law when you are serving on a jury. Difference, of course, is that if the Supreme Court does it, it applies to everybody. If you're on a jury, it just applies to that one guy in the courtroom in front of you. If you haven't heard of jury nullification before, it's not all that surprising. The powers that be really don't want anyone to know about it because it represents a direct threat to the status quo. Defense lawyers, for example, aren't allowed to talk about a jury's right to nullify during a trial. And in fact, saying that you know about jury nullification is actually one of the easiest ways to avoid jury duty altogether. You know, when they start asking you questions, just say, excuse me, can I ask you a question? Do I have the right to nullify, you know, what is jury nullification? They will immediately clear the room. Not only will you be thrown off the option of being jury duty, but so will everyone else in the room. Anyone who hears you say that. In some cases, people who spread the word about jury nullification have even been accused of committing a crime. Just 3 years ago, for example, federal prosecutors in Manhattan charged a 78-year-old former chemistry professor, a guy by the name of Julian Heineken, with jury tampering for handing out flyers outside a courthouse that informed jurors of their right to nullify. But however much they try, the authorities will never actually be able to stop people from using their jury nullification powers. And that's because the right to nullify is given to us by the 6th Amendment of the Constitution, the same part of the Bill of Rights that gives us the right to trial by jury. Judge Jerry E. Smith of the 5th Circuit Court of Appeals made this clear in an opinion he wrote earlier this month, deciding the case of United States of America versus Juan Agustin Salazar. According to Smith, when a Texas judge ordered a jury to find Juan Salazar guilty after he confessed in court to drug and gun charges, that judge violated Salazar's right to have the jury decide whether he was guilty or innocent. As Smith wrote, quote, the 6th Amendment safeguards even an obviously guilty defendant's right to have a jury decide guilt or innocence. End of quote from the decision. When you really think about it, jury nullification is among the most important rights we have as Americans. It gives us, when on a jury, the power and freedom to say no to unjust laws. It gives us, we the people, the final say over what kind of laws we want enforced. And with Nixon's failed war on drugs now in its 43rd year, it's never been more important for Americans to understand that they have this immense power. I mean, ever since Nixon declared a war on drugs in '71, the incarceration rate has skyrocketed, And because of that, America now imprisons more people than any other country in the world, not just on a per capita basis, but in absolute numbers. And it's costing us billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. In fact, according to the Washington Post, over the last 20 years, quote, spending on incarceration at the state level has outpaced budget increases for just about every other function of government, including education, transportation, and welfare. Only spending on Medicaid at the state level has grown faster. And because people of color are disproportionately arrested, imprisoned, and charged with drug crimes, the war on drugs has stunted a lot of progress we made with integration and moving forward the 1960s. Mass incarceration has become such a problem for people of color, the sociologist Michelle Alexander now calls it the new Jim Crow. Thankfully, Washington has started to wake up to the failure of the war on drugs. Attorney General Eric Holder, for example, has made sentencing reform one of his major second-term initiatives. But sentencing reform is only going to get us so far. Every year, hundreds of thousands of Americans are sent to prison, sometimes for life, for possessing or selling harmless drugs like marijuana. This has to stop. Americans need to start exercising their constitutionally provided power of jury nullification when it comes to nonviolent drug crimes. In lieu of a law passed by Congress, which I don't see happening any day soon, if being on a jury and saying no is the single best way to stop mass incarceration and end Nixon's failed war on drugs once and for all. To paraphrase Nancy Reagan, it's time for us all to just say no to convicting anyone of a nonviolent drug crime. Very interesting. Now, let me toss in the caveat that, a judge might find you in contempt of court and try to throw you in jail or something. But, it looks like it ain't going to hold up. Very interesting stuff. Okay, we had this